Yeah, go. Okay. All rise for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody, to the February 3rd meeting of the Board of Trustees. We'll begin with any miscellaneous or liaison reports on this end. Anybody?
I'm good.
No? No? Nobody? Anybody? No. Oh, you do? Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, Trustee McGovern and I have been attending the census meetings for the county, and we just want to keep mentioning over and over the importance of the census. And we'll be also asking for more volunteers and letting you know what kinds of census organization events we'll be having. So thank you.
They're also hiring, right?
They are hiring.
Yeah, you can go online.
You can go online, and they're hiring a couple of thousand people for this region. So.
Do you know how long the jobs last for? I know the
I
temporary.
think I believe through July.
People who volunteered to be on the committee for the villages, we're doing this, by the way, with Sleepy Hollow as well, the effort. Basically, as volunteers, we're getting the word out. We're communicators about the census. We're not taking information from people or putting it into the computer for them. This is purely a PR, get the word out type of a thing. I just wanted to make sure people didn't think they were
And
taking.
I think they're paying, what, $23 an hour?
If you are hired by the census, it's $23 an hour.
$23 an hour for the temporary jobs, but also, right, as Trustee McGovern said, we're trying to also help people understand the importance of the census and why everyone should respond.
All right.
Thanks.
Bobby, you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I do have one thing. The second installment of the TIAC Environmental Film and Discussion Series will be tomorrow night. It's called Cowspiracy. It's the Sustainability Secret. It's going to be held at the Warner Library, 3rd floor from 7 to 9. It's free to all ages, and there'll be free snacks. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Did you get the thing from Tash asking us to vote?
I actually thought Rich would
Are
probably.
you gonna talk about that? The message from Tash is up for 2 awards on the Westchester Magazine, the Best of Westchester. So you
Best produce and best
Farms Market. Yeah, you can go online there and vote for them. Just want to encourage you to do that.
I did get but I didn't have a chance to
You have to
open it.
vote.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to open. Okay, Richard, you're up.
I don't have any updates or reports on anything that the board
Okay.
is not already aware of.
All right, our first item is the public hearing on ARB requirements. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing? All in favor?
Aye.
I assume, I know one person's here for it.
Hi, Peter Bartolacci, 67 Miller. Now that we've got somewhat of a finalized version, I was hoping we could go through the items that I had asked about quite a while ago as to whether or not they would require architectural review board scrutiny. So I thought I'd start with that. I had asked about changing a garage door. So under the current version of the law, would that require architectural review board review?
I think the answer is yes. So if it's replaced in kind, it would not, but if it was replaced with a different style door, it would.
And it's visible from a public street. That's in 4A3.
Okay. So
Sorry.
if you want to change
I
the
hit
style,
microphone.
if it's the same type of door, that was a question that I did have, because you mentioned in, I think it's number 2, about replacing with the same kind. When we say same kind, I'll find the exact spot, but
It's number 3.
number 3. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we say the same kind, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the same brand? Are we
No,
talking about the same
No.
material? Because there's wood doors, and then there's fiberglass or composite doors or whatever the plastic is. I just feel like that same kind probably could be subject to interpretation, so if we want to be very specific, I think it would be wise to be.
Actually, let me just interrupt for one moment. The law says, for example, while replacement of wood double-hung windows with vinyl double-hung windows would not require ARB approval, replacement of double-hung windows with a casement window would. So if it was the same style
So like, let's say a rolling over.
and the same
No,
color.
no, I understand.
Right.
I understand exactly what
Right.
you're
So-
saying,
so
but
if it were
style,
wood-
I think it,
But, right, no, I mean, the example makes it clear that if it looked the same as, so let's say you had a wood door, and then you want to replace it with a vinyl door that was the same color and the same style, it would not require approval, according to how we
yeah,
wrote
I
it.
guess what I'm saying is kind can be interpreted as the same brand.
No.
Can be
Oh,
interpreted as
okay,
the
no.
same. So
Right.
if we're saying it needs to be the same style, then perhaps we should say the same style as opposed to the same kind. That's all
It
I'm
says
saying.
materials.
I'm sorry.
The
It
law
says material.
Replacement with materials that are.
It involves more than replacement with materials that are not of the same kind.
Well, it does allow change in materials.
Right.
So if you're going from a wood door to, let's say, an aluminum door, but it's, again, it's the same rolling overhead door that you normally see on a garage, it would not have to go to the ARB. If you're changing it to a swinging door, you know, from the overhead door to a swinging door, vice versa, then you would have to go to the ARB.
Yeah, I think the example makes that clear.
Yes.
You could go vinyl to wood, but can't change the style.
If you're in doubt, just call it the building department.
Yeah, I just,
You just want it to
I
be clear.
feel
I
like-
think the example makes it clear, Peter.
but that gets me to my next question,
Okay.
which is, that sentence, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm not understanding. Or I feel, I know what the sentence is trying to say, but I don't feel like that sentence says what it's trying to say. Because, here, rehabilitation of buildings that involve more than replacement with materials that are not of the same kind. So when I read
Yes.
that, I say,
I-
you're replacing something with, it has to be something in addition or beyond just not the same materials.
I think you're right.
It is awkward language.
I think you are right.
Okay. So,
I think it should say the same, perhaps, same kind or style. I think we should, I don't know, but Kathy, as a legal matter, is there any?
It's better here, let's see what you.
Maybe we should.
I think
take out
the
the
example
word
makes it clear, but I think you're right that the kind is a little bit
replacement,
ambiguous.
but it's also not, it's the not of,
Yeah, it's the net.
you understand?
double
Do you-
negative.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I hope, I can't explain, but when I read it, it doesn't, it seems like it's saying the complete opposite of what we're trying to achieve.
If we
Okay.
change that word, I have, I'll tell you this word, rehabilitation.
How about
You
exterior
said-
features?
How about if you said renovation? Would that,
Yeah, how about instead of materials, make it exterior features?
Yeah.
And then you give the example, windows, doors, siding, and garage doors, and then out of the same kind or style. Does that make sense?
Same kind or style.
And instead of cross out materials and put exterior features.
About building replacement,
What is?
more than the replacement of.
Of exterior features.
About building replacement of exterior features.
I agree with Tom about the word rehabilitation. It does
I,
seem.
you know what, I'll tell you what. We can play with the language, and I think it's a legitimate concern, but keep going, and I think it's gonna take a little tweaking. You're right.
Another year.
Yeah. The example makes it clear, but the language, the sentence before that is not clear.
Yeah.
It is awful. You're right.
so item number 3, we need to look at. Anything else?
I'm sure there's a few.
No, just fine.
Yeah, I'll just keep going through my list if that's all right, because
Mhm.
I asked the question a while back.
I mean, some of this may require that the building inspector weigh in, who's not here at the moment, but
Understood.
keep going. You'll,
So something
we'll
like,
have time to get an answer now that we're gonna have to tweak this language just on this one
Yeah.
paragraph, so.
so changing or installing a new banister or guardrail on a porch or stoop.
What number?
Where are we?
Where are we? What,
No, this
No,
is,
he's just asking a
this
question.
is just,
okay.
these are just general questions that I was trying to get an understanding of what the law would or wouldn't cover, because under the old law, that would
That would be
require,
covered, yes.
that would
be
require
covered.
ARB review, and I'm wondering whether under the new law it wouldn't or would.
Again, it would be the same, it's not excluded, so it's of the same nature. If it was the same type, same style, similar materials, but it doesn't have to be identical materials. It would not require it. So the building inspector would not say you have to bring it before the ARB. If you were gonna change it in some stylistic difference where it would change from say a wood railing to wrought iron, that looks completely different, that would have to go before the ARB.
Okay.
Right?
Steps are exempt, I think, 4B5.
I'm sorry, say it again,
I
Kathy?
think steps, if you're talking about porches, I'm sorry.
Is that a separate?
You said porches or stoops too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Steps or sidewalks are okay.
Oh, yeah, 9.
Okay.
I think they're one of the exceptions. So what about if you were repaving a driveway, changing the material on a driveway?
Depends on if you're lifting it.
I don't see anything about a driveway.
Right, there's
in
no
the
Yeah.
exception for driveways. So driveways would.
So driveways would,
Right, so if you went.
would or
so
would
if you-
not?
It would be subject to it. If it were a material change.
Should it be? I mean, I'm just asking the question.
Well, I think if you went from perhaps a,
Asphalt or concrete?
or some,
I go from forms material.
to a non, well, that's a separate one. But if you went from cobblestone to asphalt, perhaps so.
I was told it had something to do with whether you have to dig up the old or not, too, for the driveway. I just did mine, and I had to get a permit to dig it up and to relay it, even though it was the same material.
Well, that was, yeah, that's a different, but you didn't have to go before the ARB.
I, no, I had to get a permit,
for it,
yeah, the
yes.
permit
This is
for it.
whether you go before the ARB. Right, not because of appearance.
If you do it, that was my understanding as well, if you do it over existing material, you do it.
Okay.
What about installing or replacing shutters?
Shutters would be, if they're visible from the street. And they look different. Again, if they were of different type of material. Or adding them. I mean, one thing just to be clear, and I know you understand it, but the public may not understand it. Going before the ARB for these things doesn't mean you can't do that. It merely means it's reviewed. It's not a prohibition on doing any of these things, but I know you know, Peter. I know there is a burden involved with going for the ARB.
Yeah, there's a time issue.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
it delays people.
Right.
There's a cost aspect.
Mhm.
How much does it cost to go before the ARB?
I don't know. I think it depends on the project, but I'm not sure.
No, and I think
I
that's
can't
something that
answer that,
needs
but-
to be considered, you know. We
Yes.
just have to
Well,
balance things.
Well,
and
that's why
say-
Peter, we did this we excluded quite a few things that had been under the purview of these are taking things out. The question is, which ones do you leave in and which ones do you take out?
Right, but you've excluded a lot, but
Mhm.
you've also,
Right,
which was
included.
my
Still many things
concern.
included.
No,
yes.
it's not even just included
Right.
things. You've actually captured a whole other group that prior to this wouldn't have
We'll
had to.
get to that, so that will,
So,
listen.
you know,
Some things may not have been included that we feel should be included, but keep going and you can
well, no, I
bring
mean,
that up.
that was my next point, was
Okay.
that the idea was, I think, to make it easier for residents. It was- I don't know exactly
It
what
was-
the purpose was.
It was to
but-
make it easier, to remove those things which were just taking time and did not have particular impact one way or the other. That was one of the things we really wanted to do, where people were just going before, they'd get approval, but they had to wait and they had to file, and it didn't make any sense, and it was easy to otherwise do, such as paint colors within a reasonable palette.
Right, which, you know,
Right,
makes
right
perfect
now,
sense.
every paint color,
No, I
other
know.
than the same one,
Oh,
is
I know.
theoretically goes
Oh,
before
I
the
know.
ARB, so.
No, I know,
That's-
but then there's a whole other set
Right.
of stuff.
But
that
there were
is
some
now-
things that did take place in the village that were not subject to ARB approval, which we felt should be, so, but keep going and bring up which issues you have.
So, I don't know if I'm reading this, and maybe I'm not
Okay,
pulling all the laws together, but the way under this now current situation, if this law were to be passed, if you put an addition on your house that was less than 25% of the footprint of the original house,
right.
you would need no board approval whatsoever.
If your house were built after
1925.
1925.
Which was another
1929.
question. What is that,
Right.
just curiosity, what's that distinction?
Kathy, if you can, it was, it has to do with when zoning, a combination of zoning and a sense that that was a relevant date at which to distinguish between, there was zoning and pre-zoning. So that's how that date was chosen, because we felt that there was
And what the board considered to be historic.
historic significance, without requiring or that a house be officially declared a historic house. So that was the intent of it, and that was we used 1929 as the time of zoning going into effect.
So if it's built after,
1929, and you
Right.
put less than 25%, you wouldn't have to get ARB approval.
okay, all right. And you're okay with that? I mean, to
Yes.
me, okay, I just,
That was the
I
that was the
mean,
consensus
I'm
of
the last
board.
person in the world who would
Right.
be pushing for any type of board review.
It doesn't mean you can do
But-
anything, it's just not subject to ARB review.
Right, but if someone putting an addition on their house, I don't know, and they're putting siding up, wouldn't you want it to match the siding on the house, the actual house? And the way I read this right now, they could go before the village engineer and get their building permit. And, you know, the village engineer is looking at it from a structural standpoint, from a, you know, electrical compliance standpoint, et cetera. But if they decided to put different siding up, so again, I'm the last person in the world who would push
Yes.
for a board review. But I think that is something that really needs to be looked at, because I would hope that someone should look at somebody's proposed addition to make sure that it's stylistically consistent with what exists there now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the kinds of things that an actual architectural review board,
Let's go to the planning
would
board,
do.
don't they? Right?
What's that?
They still have to go to the planning board with that, or 25% or not?
no, if it's less than
No.
25%,
Right.
they don't need to.
Planning
Right.
too.
Which is why, because we talk about 25% in this law quite a bit.
Right.
And to me, it's almost, I think the delineation is 25%. The architectural review board should be capturing the stuff that is less than 25%, in my opinion, of the footprint. Yeah, 305-132A2, I think it is, no, A1 talks
You're
about.
good.
Oh, I know that law very well, trust me. Talks about rehabilitation and whatever, and it's 25%, more than 25%, it needs to go to the planning board.
Okay. Live and learn.
So, so, another thing I want to talk about is windows, and juxtaposing that with solar panels and roofing. So the way I read this law now, if I want to change the style of my windows and it's visible from a public street, I need to get ARB approval. But if I want to put solar panels on my house, as long as my roof angle is less than a certain amount, I don't need to go get any kind of
Correct.
approval. I just get
From the ARB, correct.
right. That seems crazy to me. I don't know if it seems crazy to any
Well,
of
there's
you.
not an alternative to the solar panels. There's not an alternative style that is, you're purchasing solar panels or you're not, or you're installing them in some fashion. So there's a difference, that's the primary difference, is that the solar panels are the solar panels. And aside from, and when you're changing windows, there is choices that can be made. And the decision overall has been made that the benefits of solar panels are sufficient to outweigh the questions of architectural significance, except in those areas where the steepness is very great. But there's no alternative. You can't pick a different solar panel. There's not a menu of solar panel styles from which to choose, and that's what the difference is.
Right, but there's placement, there's installation considerations, there's a lot of different things that I would think the village would want to have a say in. I know my neighbor had panels installed, and I don't like them, but that's fine, but, they have this enormous wire, instead of putting the wire up and over the back of the house and bringing it, it's not even a wire, it's actually a tube, it's like a piping. Instead of bringing it down the back of the house,
Well,
it's right down the front of
perhaps
the
if there are
house.
issues of that sort, they could be dealt with separately, but as a general rule, the notion behind how we treated solar panels, and it was done back when we did sustainable, Tarrytown, solarized Tarrytown, was that the restrictions on doing so hindered the installation of solar panels, which are viewed as a desirable thing overall. There's always issues when it comes to solar panels.
To who are they desirable?
Society, and
Okay,
as a collective
Okay.
body elected by the public, the decision was made that we wish to encourage solar panels. And so there is things, look, we have people.
So then
we
why do you
people who
have
don't-
the Architectural Review Board, I guess, is
Because,
my
the
question.
reason for
I mean-
the Architecture Review Board, you have different values that are being balanced. And the question is, when you have choices in terms of architecture, you can choose to have one window or another. But if you're going to do solar panels, if there were some reasonable choice to be made in solar panel design, then perhaps you would do that, have some level of review. But since, as far as I know, the solar panel is going to look at, now, if you bring up a point about a big wire or a cable, there may be something there that has never been raised before, and it's something that could be looked at, but it's not something that you would want to throw the entire solar panel process into the ARB for that purpose. There's other restrictions on solar panels, but.
I wholeheartedly disagree.
Let me
but-
just say something, because with solar panels, stuff that has to deal with structure, so you probably have to go to the building department because of the attached, this house attached certain things, so that would be a place where they would be checked.
Right, but they're looking at it from a compliance, making sure
Yes,
it's got
that's
the
correct.
capacity, making sure it's installed properly, et cetera. They're not looking at it from a stylistic standpoint,
Yep.
and there's certain things that you can do. I mean, the one point I want to make, that you've switched everyone, their default provider in the village
Mhm.
is clean energy,
Mhm.
right? So everyone's getting either solar or wind or
Mhm.
whatever it is.
In a
by
sense,
the-
yes.
So do we even need,
Yes, it
solar
adds
panels.
to the benefits
I mean-
that are derived from the society of lower carbon production if we are also producing solar power.
how is that?
It feeds into the grid as non-polluting power.
So-
But
so-
it's
so
that's
your-
really,
your-
it's
so
really,
your
Peter,
value
that's really a
judgment-
discussion, that's a discussion for another day.
Okay,
Let's try and stick with the architecture review board.
well, no, this is the architecture,
Okay.
and.
I know, but the benefits or costs of solar
Sorry.
power in the scheme of also providing a different default provider is a different subject. It's not
Right,
about.
but again, it's your value judgment, and you're saying that that's.
We
and
all
there-
make
there-
value-
There may be many people in the village who don't agree with that. I personally think that solar panels on top of a house
Mhm.
are hideous. Now, eventually, we're gonna get to a point where the solar panels are part of the roof, and
Mhm.
that'll be great, and,
Mhm.
stylistically, it'll look wonderful, but right now, they
Right.
look hideous. They look awful.
And
the fact that you've
you
already
feel they
switched
look
everyone.
hideous. People think windmills, some people love windmills, some people hate windmills. Some people like solar panels, some people don't like solar panels. The judgment we have made is that we're not preventing solar panels because of their look. And given that we want to encourage them otherwise,
And I want
and
everyone
that
in the
there,
village
and
to
that there
hear this.
is, yeah, absolutely, we did solarize Tarrytown. Clearly, we made a decision as a politically elected body by the people of Tarrytown to encourage solar panels. And so that decision was made in a democratic society. That's how we made it, right? So the architectural question falls by the wayside because there is no choice to be made in solar panels. And that's where the difference is, why you wouldn't have a review. If there was a significant choice about the style of solar panels, you might have you would have a case, there'd be a case to be made for it. But in the
There
absence
is.
of that.
There actually
In the
is.
absence of that solar panels, the reason why you want solar panels is not, you've put aside the question of architectural significance or not, except where you've made a narrow exception for particular things. So it's not, there's not a choice to be made. That's what the Architecture Review Board basically looks at, is people making choices about architecture.
Can we
If
move
there is one, then you don't do it.
And I beg to differ, because there is a choice. And if somebody really wants solar panels, they get the ones that are installed, they're actually they are the roof, and those exist. So
But it's not a reasonable choice, Peter.
it's an absolutely is a reasonable choice if
It's
you feel that
multiple
strongly
prices. It's
about it.
multiple prices
And I also
times the
want
price.
to
Right.
emphasize, you've already switched, everyone is getting their power,
Mhm.
unless they
Right.
defaulted out of it. They're already getting green,
Mhm.
whatever,
Right.
whatever euphemism you want to use. They're getting this green power.
Mhm.
So I think it's A, overkill, and B, you're not taking into consideration the streetscape. And, you know, you're making a big deal about windows and
Mhm.
about doors. If I want to change my garage door, I want to change this to house, somebody needs to approve it. I think there's just, there's a severe lack of proportionality.
I would
in
beg to
relation.
differ. I would say it's the other way around, but
No,
go
I,
on.
I think you're,
Right.
I think this is nuts.
I
think if
okay.
you can put solar panels on your roof without any approval from any board,
Mhm.
and yet if I want to change the windows on my house or the style of windows,
Mhm.
I need somebody to bless it. I think, you know, I don't see
Well,
how
not
you
exactly,
justify it.
but
I don't see how
it's
you
not a
justify
blessing.
it.
Peter, I think the point at this time is that there's an industry standard that's pretty typical for solar panels, and there's a myriad of choices and styles and colors and things like that for windows. So that's why you have the ARB for a street frontage as opposed to a solar panel and things like that that would be on a roof. That's just my, you know.
Fundamentally, you're completely changing the look of a house. You know, your entire streetscape
Yes.
changes by putting solar panels up. If I want to put new roofing tiles on my house, if I want a different color,
Mhm.
somebody needs to bless it. And yet I can slap ugly solar panels up.
So
I don't
Peter, are
think
you
that-
saying we
that-
should disallow solar panels in the village of Tarrytown?
No, I'm saying there might be alternatives, rather than put them on street facing, put them on the back of the house. There may be some,
Based on the sun.
Right.
understood, but somebody may choose to put them on the front of the house when they could just as easily have been, I mean, on the block that I live on, you know, you could probably get away with them on the backside.
They place them for the maximum effectiveness.
And who's determining that? Another reason why they should
It would,
probably.
no,
go to
the effectiveness is determined by the state and the installers that,
Right.
it's an engineering decision as to where the best spot is.
Right, and we're trusting them. Okay, good. Anyway,
Yes.
I just, you know, I really think some thought needs to go into the level of scrutiny that certain things are getting versus the complete lack of scrutiny that other things are getting. And I don't think it's right, and I think it's a little bit
Okay.
distorted. So
It's a public
there's an
hearing.
exceptions
It's
piece,
a public
Okay.
hearing.
and it
There's
talks
no
about
reason.
detrimental departures.
Mhm.
And I feel like, who's determining if it's detrimental? And should we even
Where's-
say
I have to, I
detrimental?
can't, where's the language? What is it?
4B.
Detrimental departures from original destruction. That's a lot of words. It's in that same paragraph.
Yes, I got it.
I mean, I just view that as intent language.
Right, it's intent. It doesn't-
Explaining
it's
what the
not-
intent is.
right,
and
it's
that's
intent of
why
the law,
These things
right.
are exempt. That's, you're not making a determination, the board already made a determination that the following subsections are what's exempt.
Right.
So nobody has to interpret that, that's just intent language.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. Maybe I missed it, sorry. I mean, the last thing, and well, there's two things. So, under, this law says that any application with a few exceptions, and I'm thankful for the one exception relating to walls, doesn't need to go to the ARB. I mean, I guess the language says, any application that goes to the planning board, with a couple of exceptions,
Mhm.
needs to also go to the ARB. When you look at the law governing what the planning board looks at, you have applications that have nothing to do with the building. 305-132 talks about any use of land where no building is proposed. Well, that application went to the planning board, it would now need to go to the Architectural Review Board. Likewise, under the historic buildings piece of that same code section, it talks about historic, it specifically calls out land as well, any changes to the land in historic
Peter, I
property.
think you're bringing up topics that aren't even the subject of this public hearing.
I think you're wrong, but I'll explain myself and maybe that will help. According to this law, which you've changed to now say, according to the ARB requirements, any application that goes to the planning board also needs to go to the Architectural Review Board. That's according to the law. That's a new change that you've made. So I'm pointing out applications that must go to the planning board. Any use of land where no building is proposed requires site plan approval by the planning board. Now, if that application, that is a use of land where no building is proposed, needs to go to the planning board, according to this law, it then needs to go to the Architectural Review Board too. And I'm saying, what is the Architectural Review Board going to do or look at if there's no building proposed?
I think it's only, I mean, Kathy, you can weigh in, but every application for a building permit involving any of the following,
Things, construction of a building, reconstruction of the building.
So it
A lot
does
of this
I mean,
is codifying things.
I
that
mean,
we
it does
do.
say ARB review is required for applications requiring planning board approval, as well as other projects which are
Yeah,
detailed
but
as
as
follows.
follows.
So it does require everything that goes to the planning board, and Mr. Bartolacci is bringing up the instance in the code that captures the requirement for planning board approval when there's just making use of land and you're not proposing a structure.
right,
But in your case, you're specifically exempting walls with plans and approvals. Like, I can't think of the specific examples sitting here right now of what other types of uses of land there would be without walls, but there could be.
But you've already said that a wall is not a use of land, so let's not confuse the issue.
No, I think we did say in the litigation.
No, in
that
the litigation-
reason the trigger was
No.
for the site plan approval both of those provisions were triggered.
No, actually,
Okay, I don't want to relitigate that.
I'll talk to you about it, but actually in the second case, in the first case you did, and in the second case, you completely did a 180 and reversed it and said it
I
isn't,
don't think
which
I
is
said-
very interesting.
I don't think I took a consistent position. But we can talk about that
It
after.
wasn't your position, I believe the
Yeah.
previous.
you're not gonna resolve
Previous
this
stuff.
at
Right,
this
we
moment.
are not going to talk about
So
private.
we have to tweak the language, we'll take a look at that. If there is a possibility that there are completely irrelevant, non-structural, architecture-related applications that might have, under the law, might otherwise not be sent to the ARB, we'll take a look at it and see if that makes any sense, but.
I
And
mean,
just-
I could
we're
see
gonna-
somebody
we're gonna-
proposing all kinds of things on the garden or, steps. I know we've had
Right.
applications that didn't involve any buildings that the planning board reviewed, but that an
Right,
ARB
it's
still would
visible
want to
and
review because
visible
it's
from the
visible,
street.
right? So I wouldn't want to preclude
Right.
something that
No, I'm
we
not
don't-
saying,
right.
right, I agree. I mean, the question is whether there's the possibility that we have captured something that would have no architectural significance whatsoever, or no streetscape significance whatsoever. I mean, the intent is clear what we're trying to do, and what the ARB review is for, but perhaps there is something in that net that is, on the fringes that maybe shouldn't be there. So, but we're gonna tweak the language on number 3, if nothing else, and so we'll take a look at that in the meantime.
My last point is right in line with this is, and I've brought it up before and I still haven't heard an answer that makes sense to me. Why does someone need to go, if they're going to the planning board already, why do they also need to go to the Architectural Review Board? There's got to be a way, even if it's absolutely incredibly vital that the Architectural Review Board look at it, you do it offline and feed the comments back into the planning board process. To force somebody to get their planning board approval and then go to the Architectural Review Board, there's a large amount of time expense, and you don't even know how much it costs to go to the Architectural Review Board, which I think is quite interesting. to me, anything that the Architectural Review Board is going to cover, the planning board will be all over it, as I found out. I don't think there's any need. If it's going to the planning board, I really don't think it needs to go to the Architectural Review Board. But that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
So,
Got that all
should
down.
I close the public hearing, or?
We'll continue the
I
hearing.
think
Continue
we
the
have to
public
continue the hearing.
Okay.
Put it
because we
back.
have to
Okay,
read
so
it.
I have a motion to continue the public hearing until the next meeting?
Second, trustee Zoll.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next.
Station overlay.
Station, yeah, right. Stationary overlay zone, continuation of public hearing. Before we open it, let me just say, as you, I believe, see in the agenda, the notion is that we will continue the public hearing until April 6th in order to process all the comments and changes that we've explained that we've intended to make. We're not closing it, we're continuing to that point. If there's new information that you want to provide, I mean, obviously, it's a public hearing tonight, so you can get up and speak, but if there's anything you want to provide in writing, there's 2 months now, we'll have in which we'll be trying to put together changes before we come back again. So, it's up to you, but it's, so, just as a precursor to the hearing being actually open, I just want to make that clear that we're not closing it tonight, we're continuing to April 6th, and we're working on adapting the language to the various changes we've discussed already, so.
Are you telling us to go home?
I'm giving you the option. But it's a public hearing and it's open, so it's your choice, but you can also write to us if there's.
And Mr. Mayor, I believe the intent would be that you would revise the law and put the revised drafts
Back out,
up on
right.
the website.
Right,
So
I
they
mean,
would
'cause-
be in advance of
Right,
the
of the
April
public
date.
hearing, right. So there's, I mean, and as we've discussed in prior public hearings, there are changes that they haven't been made officially yet, but there are changes we are making to the prior version that, respond to many of the things that you've noted over time, so.
So that will be the April 6th.
April 6th, we're gonna continue it until April 6th. There's things we have to look at, particularly on view sheds. There's ways we want to make sure that we get those exactly right, and how you judge them, and what the criteria would be, and which ones they are. So that particularly is gonna take some time.
So that will be in writing on April 6th?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we will put it all in writing prior to April 6th, so that it won't make any sense now to just, to spring it on you on April 6th with no advance notice. So, given the level of concern and issues and the complications
And
involved.
also at that time, once it's ready for circulation after we discuss it with the board, it's gonna have to go through the recirculation and renoticing and everything like that.
Yeah.
So the whole clock is really gonna start over again.
Why are you looking at me?
Letting you know.
Dolph's blocked by the other.
Come on,
Uh,
go get us.
So, we have, take a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
What if nobody says yes? Second, we got a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye, okay. All right.
Last time, the video did not include the slides, so I'm going to start out by asking if I can just have the video show the slides. I'm not going to make any comments. I'm going to go through numeric values. I propose an alternative, and the alternative I'm proposing is not necessarily the way it should be, but just for thought. It's like a thought experiment, which includes disqualifications, and then I want to go over concepts of architectural legacy, gray water, viewpoints, and what has worked in the past. Okay, just the slides from last time, the score factors. Okay, next one, Dave. The example of a scorecard. The concerns on the score. The max theoretical units, and I'm just going to take 1 second. Please note that Walgreens at 5 stories is 296 units, using the same density as we have on American Paper 38. I think that's significant. Next one, Dave, please. A new zoning approach, and leading edge. And I tried to address those verbally last time, but the video didn't cover it. Okay, thanks, Dave. I want to go over the alternatives. And as I said, this is like a thought experiment. Last time I indicated that the weights were primarily 2.1 with 4.2 for adverse conditions like a sawmill. That's what the top section shows. And the disqualification came out of a clarification where a 0 disqualifies, 1-0 disqualifies, but there are 2 which do not disqualify: architectural legacy and negative tax impact. So I would like you to consider alternate weights. And I'm not proposing them, I'm just saying as a thought experiment. Adverse conditions like a sawmill, if they're going to put a sawmill up, it's going to be disqualified. It doesn't have to have any weight at all. But the view shed, I think, is very important to the community, so I'm saying it should have 10%. Gray water I'm going to cover shortly in a different slide, so I'm leaving it basically alone. Except I think that when I get there, you'll find out why I say I do not think it should be a disqualifying factor. Architectural legacy, the previous discussion about windows and whatever clearly says that Tarrytown cares about architectural legacy. I absolutely feel that that should be a disqualifying factor. If it is not appropriate for Tarrytown, then it should be disqualified. And finally, negative tax impact. I have spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out if you were right or you're not. And Mayor, you're right. Everybody I talk to says that you can't discriminate against somebody who takes public money, spends public money, and doesn't provide taxes. You can't discriminate against that. Only in America.
Nonprofit.
Well,
I'm
not picking on nonprofits. I'm just,
nonprofit, that's the.
however they do it.
One of the baselines that a nonprofit cannot be excluded from the.
Okay. My observation of a way of getting around that, or at least addressing it, and this is not my area of expertise, please don't give anybody a blank slate to come in and do whatever they want, which is what the current SAO says. You can go 5 stories, no constraints other than 60 feet. Tell us what you want to do. Here's my well, take as much as you want. That's just wrong. Next one, Dave. When we talk about architectural legacy, I put 4 pictures together. And I ask you to try to figure out which one does not fit.
Well, the one in the right-hand corner doesn't exist.
I'm sorry?
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't, okay, neither, the one on the upper left side doesn't exist either. It's a representation. And
It's pretty close.
It's
a pretty good one.
My thought when I was putting this together
It doesn't exist.
was the emperor has no clothes. We can go to the 3rd grade and ask the question, and I think people in the 3rd grade will be able to answer it. Gray water. Last time I indicated that it might be illegal. You have the documentation that shows where I came to that conclusion. I have been to the building department several times and asked for clarification. They are investigating, they haven't figured it out. This is the best I can do, but it makes sense. Gray water, at best, is a septic system. Why would we want to have a septic system 100 feet from the Hudson River? It's just nuts. So, I know I have limited time. And you indicated that you'll be working on this next one. Your January 15th work session had several pictures about view shed. And as you know, the SAO says, quote, "Development in the SAO will not impact public scenic views of the Hudson River and Palisades." As you know, the cupola on top of this building is 55 feet tall. The red arrows indicate where that cupola is. The dotted red line is my interpretation of where that 55 feet is. Now, I don't have fancy programs, but plus or minus, that's it. You're now authorizing 60 feet. So you can look at these red lines and red arrows and figure out what 60 feet is going to look like on these sites. And the last slide is something, and I really want to say thank you very much. I've spent a fair amount of time digging through the WD and the WGBD, and you, the board, and whoever else, the other boards, did a really terrific job of working to create something down by the river that is a true asset for our community. It has dimensional protections, height, building coverage, building width, setbacks, and then you gave accommodations, or the developer gave accommodations, and those were bent a little. And they produced the Riverwalk, the park, the aquatic center, the senior citizen center, affordable housing, and the village hall. I look at the current SAO, it has one base dimension, currently 60 feet. It used to be 140 feet. The developer accommodations are none. This must be some kind of new negotiating strategy. I'm going to give you 30% more than I've ever given anybody else. I'm not going to ask anything in return, and I'm going to hope that you are going to do a good job.
I understand that point of view to a certain extent, but the notion behind the SAO is that the components of the SAO which you have to fulfill are in many ways similar or not, or even in other ways greater accommodations for the community. So built into the system is really a different way of approaching it. So in order to fulfill those categories, you can't just come and you can't get zeros on all those other aspects of the project, which you have to take, that are part of it. So in order to even get to the SAO designation, which we always have to remember that there's underlying zoning that exists anyway. You have to pass on all these other factors that are there. So you're not just saying, okay, build it's not 120 anymore, but a 60-foot building with nothing else, and therefore just go right ahead and do it. So it's not simply a blank slate with nothing else being positive for the community. When you go through the categories, there are things that have to be met in order to get that designation. So it's not quite so simple as saying, just build 60 feet.
Has been that I call them the $200 an hour consultants with Gucci loafers.
Mm-hmm.
They can come in and they can evaluate anything, and they can figure out how they can meet all of those little requirements, and they can sell you, they're the music man. I mean, they can sell you anything, and you're going to end up with something. And I know I have limited time.
Right, okay, go on.
My point of this slide is I think you did a terrific job with the WGBD and the WD. I ask you to do the same kind of thing here. That's the last slide, and then especially because I won't have an opportunity to come back here for 2 months. I looked at the Tarrytown Connected goals. Of 21 goals on page 26, there are 5 that, in my opinion, this SAO is contrary to. Ensure fiscal health and stability. It drives me crazy that we don't have a way, or we apparently don't have a way, of even looking at fiscal health of a project. Preserve and enhance historical resources and institutions, maintain village identity, connect and enhance open space, and strengthen connections to the Hudson River. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the SAO? Or can we continue the public hearing? No, David? Okay.
I got it.
You don't have
I
to.
pay for parking.
No, you didn't.
All right, I didn't, but, no, thanks for, I think, we're going to see in writing. The view sheds will have changed,
Right.
I'm hoping. But since I don't see it in writing, I just want to reinforce that again, and selfishly, my house is, that's my backyard. And so, which also aligns with the village coming down Main Street. And keeping in mind, number two, that that view shed, if it's not respected, we're gonna see the back of whatever construction happens there. So,
Well, I don't want to,
no, go.
ruin things, but you could still see the back of construction. I mean, the view shed is above your house.
Right.
So there is a chance, I'm not saying that's, there's no plan there, but there is a chance that there's gonna be something could be built that will
And
block
I-
your view.
I completely
Okay.
understand that. I'm just saying aesthetically,
Right.
we keep that in mind, that the back, even though that's the back, it faces Tarrytown.
Mm-hmm.
So it faces Tarrytown, the village will see the back of what's ever constructed
Right.
there.
Yeah, no,
Aesthetically, it should be as wonderful as
yeah,
the front.
no, it's always an issue, as we will note later as well.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Take a motion to continue the public hearing to April 6th. All in favor? Okay. Opportunity for the public to address the board on agenda items. We might as well, I know people are here, for a non-agenda item. So what we usually do is at the end, but I think that we will open up the general comment period now. To take general comments, doesn't have to be on agenda item. So I know there are people here who wish to speak, so if you have three, we do five or we do three? We do five. Oh, at five at the end, okay.
Peter Bartolacci, 67 Miller. I just wanted to check on, has there been any discussion or progress on the home rule resolution?
I'm sorry.
Home rule resolution for speed limits in Tarrytown?
Richard, I don't think you've gotten anywhere with that, right? No. We have to hold some, we haven't had a chance to get back to it.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe other people want to get out, if I'm not mistaken. Right, this is your chance.
Hi. My name, for those who don't know, is Andrea Tabor, and I live at 5 Warner Lane in Tarrytown. I'm here to talk about the trail, the new trail in Wilson Park. Our home is probably the most directly and adversely affected by the new path that is being built in Wilson Park, because that path, rather than being the T-shaped path down the middle of the park that was always envisioned when I went back and looked at all the previous discussions and board meetings, but the path runs from the top of the hill, it runs in a northerly direction directly towards my house, and then it turns and runs along the entire backyard of my house. It is not a T. It is from the Ridge Trail. It is anything but a T. If you have not seen what this trail now looks like from our vantage point, I invite you to contact me, and I will be delighted to welcome you into my home to view it. I especially invite the Board of Trustees to come over and see it for yourselves. I make a mean cup of coffee. Viewing the trail on the plans, or even from the trail itself, one simply cannot appreciate how it appears to the neighbors who must now look at it every single day. At the Board of Trustees work session on Wednesday, I and a number of neighbors spoke at length about our objections to the project. In the interest of time, I will not reiterate my comments tonight. I am here because I thought it was important to go on the record with our concerns so that all the residents of Tarrytown are aware of them. Also, since it seems abundantly clear that the Board of Trustees has no intention of reversing their decision to build this path, despite the strong objections that were voiced at the work session, I am here to offer what I believe to be some very reasonable and achievable suggestions. So please hear me out. What I would like to propose is that everyone involved take a deep breath and consider some minor revisions to the current plan. It seems to me, and to many others with whom I have spoken, that by adopting the following suggestions, all of the trustees' objectives can be met. At the same time, the path can be made less aesthetically displeasing and upsetting to the neighboring homeowners, and it can have the added advantage of being significantly less expensive to build and maintain. First, the path should be narrowed. The 6-foot width is simply excessive and makes it look like there is now a road through Wilson Park. Narrowing the path will still accomplish the trustees' goal of connecting the Ridge Trail to the Lakes Trail and will obviously be more in keeping with the natural look of the park. Second, the trustees' goal of making the path accessible, while very laudable, simply cannot be met with the current plan to line it with crushed stone. If anyone has ever tried to push a wheelchair on gravel, especially up or down a hill, you will understand what I mean. Crushed stone is also dangerous for bicycles, which, unless they are specially designed mountain bikes, are unstable on such surfaces. It is also difficult for strollers and even for walkers, as it tends to be slippery, especially on an incline. I myself have fallen several times at the Rockefeller Preserve when the trail has gone to gravel because the footing is very unstable. What I would encourage the trustees to do instead is to pack the new trench firmly with earth and then plant grass on it. This would not only be much less expensive than lining it with crushed stone, but it would be far easier and less expensive to maintain. It would only need to be mowed. And since the lawnmowers are in the park anyway, it would not create the additional expense that maintaining crushed stone requires. It could then be landscaped on either side to soften it and to delineate the borders. If necessary, it could even be lined at ground level by small Belgian blocks or stones to keep the park from encroaching on it. The path also could be lined with natural foliage, which we were told is planned anyway, and which would be compatible with what existed before. In these pictures, you can see how natural and beautiful such a path would be. It is a stark contrast to what the path looks like now. I don't know if the camera can zoom in, but this is a grass path, beautifully landscaped on either side. Here is a grass path with a more natural surrounding. It's quite beautiful. Sorry. And here is another one, which is a little bit in between, with a lot of natural grass on the side, but some planted flowers. These are all natural grass paths. Unfortunately, this is what the path looks like now. It is a stark contrast to what will be very green, we hope, come spring. This is as it passes the back of my home. You can see how close it is. It is so close I can see very well the faces of anybody who walks on it, and they can see me. In sum, replacing the gravel with packed earth and grass will have the desirous effects of, 1, making the trail safer, thus reducing potential liability for the village. 2, making the trail more accessible for the handicapped, as well as making it easier for strollers and even walkers to negotiate. 3, making the trail less expensive to build and to maintain. And 4, making the trail less jarring, more aesthetically pleasing, and more compatible with the bucolic nature that people love most about Wilson Park. So I would ask the board, at the very least, why would you not do this? Thank you. Now, a number of people had questions that they wanted to ask, many who could not be here tonight. So a list was compiled, and Valerie will be happy to read that if I'm out of time, or I can read it. But
let's move on to another person. That's good.
Excuse, where did you get your information about grass being a better format for the pathway instead of what the crushed gravel?
Unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience with disabilities. The reason I'm living in my house is because we thought we needed an accessible house. My daughter's, the man we thought she was going to marry and who she dated for 4 years lost both his legs in Afghanistan. And a week after we moved into our house, he broke up with her. So it's a little ironic, but over 4 years, I had a lot of experience. And my daughter wheeled him all over the place. He wheeled himself.
But this is just your experience with it, right?
It's my experience, but
So
I
you haven't
also
done
looked at,
research
I
on
also looked at the ADA guidelines. I looked at something called the accessibility, the ADA AG, which is the ADA accessibility guidelines. I looked at some of the state laws for bike paths. So I researched.
Yeah, I have to check with Anthony, because I've never heard of grass being the alternative. I too have a person in a wheelchair living with me, and honestly, grass would be the last thing I would want to push my mother on after a rainstorm in a park.
Well, if it's compacted, if the ground is compacted well.
This is
and
me,
then,
my personal feelings about it, your personal feelings about it. What I
Okay,
feel I
but-
want is professional personal feelings about it, and whether or not grass is even a viable entity there.
I
have
would be
some
happy
concern.
to contact some of the people,
Oh, I will too.
the ADA people, and you know, whether the accessibility guidelines, and ask them. I just know that gravel is impossible. It's just impossible. Have you tried wheeling her on gravel?
Yeah, well, this is not gravel.
Well, it's crushed stone. It's crushed stone.
Crushed stone,
It-
and it
right.
does roll fairly well, so.
It's very compacted,
I mean,
as
I'm
the
sorry.
other
It's
paths.
only
are.
compacted right now, because it was just done.
No,
It
the
will
other-
not be.
No, the other paths, the paths that's up there now, it's very compacted, the one across the top, and it also is very grassed, as it happens. I mean, the likelihood that a grass path would remain as a grass path is pretty low, and this gives you some opportunity
You-
to maintain it as a compacted crushed
It will be
stone.
expensive, and if you can line a grass path with even some Belgian block or line it with stones, it will prevent the park from
I had
encroaching
a
on it.
park person look at this,
Yeah.
right? And this is what she recommended to us. So here's the
Landscape
thing.
designer.
So I need to go back to her, and I'd like to ask her, why didn't you put grass there? It'd be very interesting to hear why she didn't put grass there, and because I have a real
I-
concern about
I
grass. I
appreciate,
do.
yes, that would be interesting to hear. But again, from everything I read, it really seems that maybe grass, yes, linoleum would be the best thing. But this is a park.
I know.
So, given the choice between something like compacted earth with a very closely mowed grass surface and crushed stone, I think that the grass would be much easier to negotiate. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to say something about accessibility. It's ADA, and people in wheelchairs is important, but the issue of accessibility is also that it's accessible, meaning open and inviting to people who are in the park. So making the park accessible, not only to people who have disabilities. It could be, people who just, elderly people who don't want to walk in the grass, people who don't want to walk in the grass, people who don't want to, walk in the grass because they're afraid of ticks, people who don't know that the park is there. We all know that park is there. I've spent the last 20 years working on that park, and so, I know where to go, but people in the village don't know where to go, and so accessible with a small a. So it's not only accessible in the handicapped sense, but accessible for everybody to come in.
I understand that,
So-
but I'm not talking about people having to walk through high grass, and certainly a trail like this is it's very obvious where the trail is. There's not a danger of ticks at something like this, and this would make it very accessible and would still keep the beautiful, bucolic nature of the park. It would fit in. It would not be a jarring, jagged scar serpentining down the hill as it is now. Thank you.
Richard, can we contact Louise Munz and ask her opinion on grass?
It was Anthony.
Okay, thank you.
Valerie?
Would you like a copy of this? I'm Valerie Kopelman, a neighbor in Wilson Park area. And many of us have been to a variety of meetings. And I haven't been to all of them. I've been to a couple. And so we don't all know the same, don't all have the same information. And these are the questions that are outstanding.
amongst us. I'll read them. One, who proposed the new path through Wilson Park, and who proposed that it be constructed at this time? We have found absolutely no record of discussions about this other than the motion to approve the contractor. All previous discussion about Wilson Park centered only on the Ridge Trail, which people objected to several years ago. Was the planning board or Parks Committee involved in this project? 2, were there any studies done to assess if the new path would be economically worthwhile? That is, how many people would actually use it, or the public's desire for it? 3, who designed the current path through Wilson Park? Was it done by a licensed landscape designer? Were there any alternative designs considered other than the 6-foot wide gravel road? If so, what were they? Was there an environmental impact study done before bids were solicited and the construction begun? Was there any impact study done to assess the effect that this might have on parking on Wilson Park Drive? Again, I know many of these things were addressed in some way, but we don't have
Well,
the
to give you specific
specifics.
answers, Richard would have to respond.
We'll have to look into
Yeah,
it.
I mean, there's, anecdotally, there were several meetings in which it was discussed, which you referenced. And it was
I sent
also,
an email out to Mr. Tabor last week.
right, which you detailed, and there were prior discussions in which, not that particular route of the path, but what happened was when the slopes were examined and looked at, the notion that to reduce the slope was what resulted in the path. Secondly, the relative success of the paths on top having a curved design and winding was inspired to some extent how you would otherwise do it, plus the trees and the geography that was there led to the design. So, and it's a 5.5 foot wide, and came about because of the expense of it was actually works with the contractor. It keeps the cost down, and it also, if you take a look at the other path, what happens over time is that the grass in the park encroaches on it, and it softens it all by itself automatically, and it's shrunk that path dramatically. The other paths, we went from I think 4 feet to 3 feet, if I'm not mistaken. It's something like that.
That sounds
One
right.
portion
Not
is
even
about
less.
4 feet. One portion was reduced down to 3 feet, and where there's any sunlight, the 3 feet is down to like
18 inches.
Yeah, if it's 18 inches,
Yeah.
and the 4 to 4.5 feet is down to 3 feet. So it softens naturally over time, and what appears now clearly is not what it's going to look like when it's complete. And you can see from the path across the top that it changes over time. It lightens in color.
The thing is, you know, the neighbors, the residents right there abutting these paths have a right to have some input. And, you know,
Yeah, well,
if you come in at, you know, meeting 1 and then there are 5 other meetings afterwards, you know, you still want to hear what's proposed to go forward, what's been agreed
Right,
to.
and the path is laid out for months and months, the design of the path. You know, I mean, it was literally in the fall that,
I could read the statement that I sent, you know, that's got a lot of information.
But shouldn't you contact the neighbors and tell them what's up? That
Yeah,
something's going to be, let me
Yeah.
just finish these
you get
questions.
questions,
I
and
mean,
then we
you know,
can
you
try,
have
and
them.
I just wanted to give you a general answer because we don't have the exact
Yeah.
answer, so, yeah.
Was the U.S. Access Board or any other governmental authority consulted to ensure that the proposed path complied with the relevant state and federal regulations regarding accessibility for the disabled? 7, what experts or authorities were consulted to ascertain whether the path would be suitable as a mixed-use path and/or safe for bicycle use as required by New York State? Has bicycle use ever been addressed or approved for Wilson Park? Why was there no opportunity for the residents to weigh in on whether Tarrytown should spend their hard-earned tax dollars on this project? Why weren't the homeowners who are most directly and adversely affected by this project given any notice of the project or an opportunity to weigh in on it before the construction began? Regardless of alterations that might be made to the current plan, what steps are being taken to mitigate its impact? Will there be aggressive replanting of both trees and vegetation to replace everything that has been removed? We respectfully ask the board to provide written responses to the questions that we presented as soon as possible. We also respectfully ask the board to provide us with the detailed plans for Wilson Park, including all future projects, changes, and/or improvements, including plantings, structures, or additions.
We'll have Richard's now. Okay, thank you.
My name is Heather Dyer, and I live at 7 Warner Lane, and I'm here to address the recent construction of the path through the middle of Wilson Park. First, speaking just simply as a resident of Tarrytown and a frequent user of Wilson Park, I would prefer that Wilson Park be left as natural as possible, as I don't see that there's a need for the redesign of the location of bushes and plantings from what nature intended, or to add trails into what is a perfectly accessible area, given that it is fully mowed. There is a nice diversity of wildlife in Wilson Park, and the more the village continues to develop it and change things, that diversity of wildlife will be compromised. Now speaking as a neighbor to Wilson Park, if there is no intention to rethink the current plans, then I would at least ask you to consider the impact that you are having on village residents that live next to the park. In our case specifically, the raspberry bushes and the other natural buffers that have been recently mowed down and removed, and now that let me read that again. In our case, I'm reading for my husband as well. We composed this together. In our case specifically, the raspberry bushes and the other natural buffers have been recently mowed down, and now the flow of foot traffic that previously was dispersed throughout the park is now directed via this new path to within a very short distance of where our 8-year-old plays in our yard. In the spirit of being a good neighbor, I would ask that the village includes the replanting of bushes and plantings along the border with our backyard to reconstitute the buffer that previously existed. Also, there was some discussion just now. I have not been able to locate the details of the overall plans of Wilson Park. In fact, I have looked through the minutes and agendas for the trustees and the planning board back through 2017 so far, and I will continue. The 3 meetings that you mentioned in your email to the Tabors and myself, they were working sessions, so there's no information on the public agenda. That's not really an opportunity for the public to comment. And then the only piece of that that went through in December was the approval of the budget. So again, there doesn't appear to be, at least in recent, in recent public discussion or on recent record, any sort of, plan that shows what the landscaping plan for Wilson Park is. Personally, our greatest concern is the potential to include benches, gazebos, lighting, or other structures that may attract the element that currently actually litters, vandalizes, drinks, and whatever else in the areas where the benches and structures have been placed along the Tarrytown lakes. I don't know if anybody's been there recently, but there is a ton of litter, beer bottles, whatnot, spray paints on the trees. I mean, it's not something that we want behind our house. Since the path was built without any preceding public hearing to allow residents to provide their feedback, we, my husband and I, would like to know what the next steps are included in the master plan of Terrytown Wilson's Park, and where can we view this plan?
This was the only item that had on any agenda anytime. There was, and I can't recall, it was years ago that the first drawings came about. And back in 2017 when I believe it was that? No, before that, but back in 2017 when basically through the planning board primarily, the path across the top was built by the
Toll
developer.
Brothers.
Right. By the
True,
people who built their
and
houses.
that-
They were required under that agreement, and the thought at that time was that we had wanted to, but whatever took place at the planning board, they were unwilling or unable to complete the path down to the Lakes Trail. And there was, I wasn't present in those discussions, but I saw drawings that came out of it from the planning board, in which the planning board worked on there were other designs, but that was it.
Mm-hmm.
There had
Okay.
been, many years earlier, there were plans for actual roads, not a path,
Right,
in which for handicapped accessibility for vehicles and whatnot.
sure.
But that was in even older plans.
But there's no plans for gazebos.
But there's no plans for
lighting.
there's no plans for anything.
There's no plans for benches, nothing. There's no
Okay.
plans for anything like that.
So this is it?
At the moment, it is. I mean, look, I'm not going to sit there and say we will never do anything else with the park. It's a public park. You know, the village spent $1 million approximately to buy that land.
What was the
and-
date of that?
I'm sorry.
Does anybody know the date of that, when that purchase happened?
Well, the actual closing, a couple of years ago. Well, the actual closing took place only a few years ago.
Right, I think in 2014, I think I
Yeah.
saw.
I
But-
can't remember exactly, but the first discussions over that land took place prior to 2005, actually. Yeah, before I was mayor. And then when
20 years
when there were 3 different developers, I believe,
Mhm.
and the plans that were approved, we were able to reduce the number of houses to the 4
Right.
there, and then I can't remember the number on the other side of the road,
Mhm.
but it was I think the proposal was for 24 houses
Yeah, it was-
originally,
it was bad,
something
yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah,
And then we got it down to, I don't know, 17, and then we were able to get it down further, I
Okay.
would think. So but it was approximately $1 million in open space funds that we used for the purchase of that land and down to the soccer field area. But primarily that land, because the developer didn't want the soccer field anyway.
Right,
But it was that land in which there were houses that were slated to be built on.
okay,
And we reduced the density of that to the 4 houses, to your house, to the Tabor's house, and then the Ann Curry's, and then the one they haven't built yet.
okay.
But I can't remember when we probably negotiated that back in, I don't know, 2010 or something, but that was purely the land deal, you know, and then the terms of it, and then it died, and then it came back. So it was pre-2009 and 2008.
Okay.
The circumstances had changed with the recession.
Right.
And then it closed sometime after that.
Okay, so then, that's it. I mean, I guess I'm skeptical, because there's been lots of talk about plantings, and there's been a lot of work done in the park, you know, ripping up all the raspberry bushes and
Well, they're
moving
not
everything
all
around.
ripped up. I
Well,
believe.
There's very few left behind our property,
Yeah,
which
but
has
they
created
definitely,
essentially
I know
open
that
space.
Anthony didn't tear them all up. There's definitely
No,
raspberry
no,
bushes, but-
they're still there.
yeah.
I guess my question is that now we have a large open space, right, up against, and that's, you know, what I'm asking for the board to consider. And I would love, you know, I'm not asking for input into it, I would just love to see it so that we
Yeah,
know
well,
what is coming
At the
behind our
moment,
house.
there's nothing, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't plant, you know, that we would look at planting.
I'm
things in,
hopeful,
but, yeah.
because the traffic has been directed
Mhm.
now right
Right.
behind our house, like we're right there.
Yeah.
And people can literally walk right up to our yard, and they do often, because they're kind of there looking around.
I don't remember anything, to be honest, I don't remember anything being removed where your house is.
Yes, it's been a significant, like, the mowing each year has gotten increasingly farther. So there was, a huge prior patch or whatever right next to, and then there was a number of, I don't know, it was a buffer of probably at least a couple feet of just bushes and long grass and whatnot. So people like literally wouldn't walk up and, step up on that rock wall and come over. We've had that happen too.
Yeah.
So that's all we're asking. I think now as the town has increased the traffic concentrated behind our house, whereas before people would kind of wander off in different directions, now they're all there. And that's where our son plays, and I don't feel comfortable with that, and I can't imagine that any of you with children or grandchildren or whatever would feel comfortable with that either.
No, we're not in a position to make any promise, but we'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Over time. I mean, it would be something that would take place over time.
I appreciate that. And then finally, I just wanted to ask, there was some discussion about the paths. Again, I think it was a communication from Mr. Slingerland that he mentioned that the paths, the town will now have to make a concerted effort to remove weeds from the paths. And we just wanted to make sure that this doesn't include any use of herbicides.
Right. The intent is not to use any other than natural products, if there are any. That's the question. The thing we're trying to find out is if there is a non-toxic way of getting rid of the crabgrasses.
Okay, because I think
apparently there's been some success with certain green products, but it's not clear that they work at this point.
Because it's a concern, and I just for the record, I want to say part of the reason why those paths have overgrown so significantly on the top is because they're just not used. So that's another thing.
Well, I have to say, crabgrass doesn't care. You would have to have so much traffic on those paths to knock them down.
Even somebody every day might help.
It takes a lot of traffic to keep the crabgrass, and it is serious crabgrass that's out there.
I mean, it's a park. It's a natural wild park.
Yep.
So that we're
well,
changing.
to be clear, it were houses that were there. It was not that, it's carved from a manicured landscape.
It just got a little more manicured, especially with all the mowing and the replanting and the ripping out and stuff. It just got a lot more manicured.
But it was Rockefeller houses that were there, and then some other place. So it was a very manicured landscape. The woods by the lake is something different, but it was in fact a manicured landscape, which is why there's only a scattering of trees and there's the meadows, and it wasn't a farm. But anyway.
We preferred the natural and non-manicured. So thank you.
Thank you.
I can just second what Heather said about the plantings. If you, again, and you're all invited, if you come to my house to see, you will see that they dug up a huge area on the corner of my property, or right by the corner of my property, both on the back part and the side part, which was all, it
was a bramble of different things.
It was lovely.
I know
it was
exactly
like a meadow,
what
and it's gone. Now it's just dirt. And I'm hoping that they will, whatever you do with the surface of the path, that at least that be replanted. And although this has nothing to do with it, I'm very happy that Tarrytown is so flush and has tens of thousands of dollars to spend on this. So, could I maybe get a refund on the $1,000 I had to pay to remove the dead trees in the park as a good citizen? Because they were dangerous.
I could look into that. I'm not a.
I think that would only be
I don't
fair
know
at
what
this
you were-
point, because
Honestly,
I don't think I should have.
I don't know what you're referring to. I can look into it.
Okay, I can, and when my husband returns, I can give you more information. But we brought to the attention of the village that there were 3 very dangerous-looking dead trees, and we were told there was no money to take them down, but if we would pay $1,000, then they would take them down. So, as I said at the work session, they took down 2 of them. The third one fell before they could even take it down, thus validating our concerns that these were very dangerous dead trees. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But that really shouldn't have been our responsibility. We just agreed to do it because we were good citizens and neighbors and concerned and didn't want anybody to get hurt. But since Tarrytown now seems to have so much money that it can spend tens of thousands of dollars on
I'm
this
a little
trail.
confused by that. You actually took down the trees?
No,
You paid-
Tarrytown did. 2 of them, the other
And
one
you
fell.
paid Terrytown?
We pay, yes.
Okay.
They told us it was $1,000. And we
So you
said,
just
okay.
look into it.
I'm gonna look into that.
We should look into that, Rich.
That doesn't,
You know, just doesn't seem right
I'll
at this point.
If it's appropriate, bring it back.
That's all right.
I was happy to do it then, but given now, it really sort of doesn't seem right.
yeah, I don't
Thank
know
you.
what the circumstances
If
were.
somebody made a bad decision, give them back the money.
We'll see.
That's all.
Well, my name's Kevin Miller. I live at 191 Union Ave. We've been here, my family's been here for about 4.5 years. I have a 10-year-old now and an 8-year-old. When we moved here, I discovered the Wilson Park, and I discovered it as a place and a way to get around town, get to Weber Park, to friends who live in Weber Park and Sleepy Hollow, to connect, to go down to Sleepy Hollow High School, to go running in the trails at Rockefeller. And I've been disappointed that they're not used enough. I'd like to speak to the importance for just connecting in ways that don't involve driving, walking, biking, and I don't think they're used enough. I respect people's desire to maintain the beauty of the area and to not have people going through, but I've ridden my bike through Wilson Park. There's somebody who came out and sort of yelled at me that I'm not allowed to be riding my bike through there. And it's a park, and it's a park that's meant to bring us together. I do understand if you live in certain areas that you want it to stay in the beauty that it is, but I also think it's so important, it's vital that we are able to get around, and we're all very concerned about getting around by car, how hard it is to drive around Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. You know, we take 1 mile, 2 mile trips, get stuck in traffic jams. And I think if people were, I know that when people are walking and biking to see each other and to participate in our villages, people are a lot happier. And I think that Wilson Park is one of the ways that you can connect from, for example, where we live in the Crest to get down to town, to get to the other villages. Also, my son was involved in a little running team this last fall. And so one of the things we did was we ran from the high school up into Wilson Park. And it was great, 20 kids from the ages of 7 and 10 discovering this park that none of them knew of. Very few people know of Wilson Park. And it should not be that way. It should not be, it feels like a private park. And I don't think it should be that way. Again, I respect people's need and want for it to be a quiet place, but I think it can be peaceful, quiet, and also accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Preceded the
Catherine?
pet, though, right? You said it was great, and it preceded the pet. You ran through the park, and it was great.
There's not, it's
just
hard.
No, it's not a,
Okay.
yeah, please address
My
your
name is
comments.
Kathy Ruland. I live in Tarrytown, 17 Walden Road. And I've been involved with Wilson Park since 1999 when I moved here. And there were a lot of citizens who really wanted to have a green space, a beautiful green space. It was a green space because the Rockefellers maintained it as a, it was just grass and trees. There were no wineberry, raspberry bushes. There were no angelica, devil's walking stick kind of plants. There were no vines climbing into the trees. It was just a very peaceful place. And I have photographs of my 2 young girls when they were 2 and 4 and 1 and 3, and a baby and 2 in that beautiful parkland. And at that time, it was just grass and trees. There were no bushes. There was nothing else. And as the development began to kind of gel before the recession and then after the recession, it became clear that things were going to change. It wasn't going to just be this big open space of grass and trees. And it turned into some houses, and the village was able to save the center area as a park. And that was remarkable. It was a coming together of the government and of the people to get something really positive. And we have a lot of ticks. We do. My dogs get ticks, the children get ticks, and now that it's a park, people avoid it because there's nowhere to go where they can't be positive that they won't get ticks. But it is a public park, and so when the path across the top was put in, it was really nice. It was nice for the people who live up there, the sisters in the convent, the families with children. My neighbors won't go up there yet. They're too scared of the ticks. But maybe if that path is wide enough, they can feel safer. The one that's got the crabgrass growing in, I think that still makes them nervous with their 3 and their 5-year-old. There's a lot of invasive plants in Wilson Park. The wineberry is an invasive plant. The devil's walking stick is an invasive plant. Mile a minute is an invasive plant. Porcelain berry is an invasive plant. They are all growing in there, and I think the Parks Department is interested in removing the invasives and planting native plants that can be maintained and that will not go crazy and start pulling down the trees, which is, if you go in there, you can still see that. Volunteers have worked hard to take out vines so that more trees don't get pulled down. And I just want to applaud the village for connecting up the T that was supposed to be connected up down to the path. That was something that a lot of citizens wanted because they don't want ticks and they want to know where the rail trail is. The rail trail has a beautiful surface. It's a gravel surface. It's the same surface that's intended for this trail where they are in the process of putting gravel down. As you see when you walk on the rail trail, as you see when you walk across the ridge trail, it's a comfortable thing to walk on. It's comfortable to bike on. People will, run on it. Dogs will run on it. I don't think that it's super expensive. I think it's a reasonable expense, and it gives you the desired result. And you can always go down to the rail trail. The rail trail is gravel, and it works just fine, and a lot of people use it. And to say that the people who are going to school at EF can't use the lakes area when they have their building right across the street from it, you can't do that. They do live here. They do go to college here. They do learn English here. And yeah, they're young people, and they drink, and they go down to the lakes, and they make a mess. Well, that's what happens with young people, and we have to address it, and we have to deal with it. And I think the village has talked to EF, and we've tried to come up with ways to deal with it. We've put garbage cans in locations that are maybe awkward for the village to get cleaned up. But people are using the garbage cans, and sometimes the director at EF will talk to the new students and say, this is a problem, and can you participate in keeping it clean? So, these are the things that go on, but a public park is a public park, and it should be used by the people. They should have the opportunity to use it and enjoy it and not feel worried about ticks and not feel worried about, not being able to get from A to B. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Fred Maws. Most people here know me as the husband of Kathy Ruland. She wrote this out for me to read here. So as her husband, I too live at 17 Walden Road, and I consider myself one of...
As long as you read that.
I'm one of those who feel very privileged to live near such a wonderful, beautiful park. And I use it frequently. I jog there maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And with the rest of my family, we walk our dog there. Before global warming, I also skied there. And I'm also one of those who stood in front of CVS about, my recollection, Mayor, is about 20 years ago, collecting signatures for a petition for a bond resolution that made the purchase of Wilson Park possible. And my recollection is
2002, I think.
That was 2002?
I think so.
And I think we raised
2001 and 2 was the
I think it
bond
was,
resolution.
the bond resolution was for $3 million, and I think about $1 million went to Wilson Park. And if it was a 30-year bond, then the taxpayers of Tarrytown are still paying for the park that my family has the privilege of using almost daily. Taxpayers also pay for Wilson Park because it's off the tax roll, thus increasing the tax burden of all the other property in the village. But Wilson Park, for this reason, belongs to all Tarrytowners. And I'm happy for the village's purchase. I think it went very well. We negotiated a very good deal with or you guys negotiated a very good deal with the developers. But like Mr. Miller, I'm disappointed that so few people use the park. I'm also disappointed that the village doesn't do more to encourage its use, right? I didn't petition for the bond resolution so that my family could enjoy it in solitude. I envisioned that it would be something that would be used by more of the village residents. Now, I think that trail is going to go a long way to increasing the use of the park because it creates an access. My wife said people are truly scared of ticks. They don't want to walk in grass. And they may be right. I think there probably is a danger to walk in grass. I walk on the grass, but then I'm a crazy person. Some people I think are more prudent. And I think a non-grass surface is going to be better for people and going to encourage people to use it. But there needs to be other measures taken to increase the enjoyment of Wilson Park and other parks, perhaps. I would like to see a map of all the trails in the village. And I would like to see that map distributed broadly here. I'd like to see more signage in front of these trails that we have. And more importantly, I would like to see the village come up with a village policy on its parks. Now, maybe one already exists and I haven't seen it. We ought to dust it off because I think if we had that policy, then a lot of the issues that you're hearing here today should be solved. To come up with that policy, we need to have a process by which stakeholders are informed of the policy being developed and that they're invited to come and comment on that policy. And it should include issues like, why do we invest in these parks? How should they be enjoyed? What are the uses that are permitted? Is it walking? Is it biking? Picnicking? Barbecuing? Should we have benches? Should we have gazebos? Right? These are the issues that we need to put in front of people and have them comment on. And we need to reach out, as I said, to all the stakeholders, and that includes TIAC, the Lakes Committee, Mothers Out Front, the schools, PTA, hiking groups, bicycling groups, and yes, the neighbors, and yes, the taxpayers of Tarrytown. And as my wife said, I think one big reason people haven't been using the park is because of the fear of ticks. And I think I think they're probably right. I've heard of people getting ticks in their backyard just walking on the grass, and it's those kinds of stories that inform people. And when I talk to people, my neighbors, they say they won't walk up there because of the ticks. I'm hoping that this trail that you're putting in solves that. We will see. But I think it's going to go a long way to helping the village encourage greater use of Wilson Park and getting, frankly, a return on its investment there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. We are presently putting together a brochure with all the trails.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Hopefully
Glad
by
to
the
hear.
end, in the springtime, we might be able to roll it out.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Good to hear.
I think that one thing that I really resonate with it, being the newest person on the board, is that I really feel like I didn't feel informed at all about the project. I didn't have a knowledge that these trails were even being built prior to joining the board, frankly. So I do think there's an issue of people not knowing about the trails and how the connectivity of them.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be more education of the people in Terrytown, so that we don't have a situation where Mr. Miller comes up and says, I wasn't even aware of this beautiful land here. People should be aware of it, right? And they should be aware of the fact that they can walk up there, they can walk safely through the park and reach the rail trail, and from that trail reach this myriad network of trails that go all around the lakes that my wife has had a very big role in creating. Anyway, thank you.
Good evening. Craig Allen, 29 Warren Avenue. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for the fabulous trail, the completion of a plan that was long in the works. I used to have, through Kathy, I used to have a plan of that up on the Tarrytown Lakes website, which unfortunately is no longer there, but the plan was clearly there before. So I'd like to say I completely support the new trail. It's in a public park, next to a public road, for public use. And I'm very concerned that some of my neighbours believe it's a private park and a private road that shouldn't have cars parked in it by anybody that's using the park. Maybe you're actually advocating for the road to be widened, I'm not quite sure. But, so people can park there safely. Now, the idea that the trail that's being put in, there was a lot of misinformation put forward tonight. One of those photographs clearly showed the incomplete trail. And if the people here had... Sorry. Thank you, Richard. The trail, there's a little section of it with the crushed grey stone in it, which is grey stone, not the white or base stone that's there. It looks like a great trail. It's following the lower gradient to the side so that it doesn't disrupt the little hill that's used for kids for sledding on, which is fantastic that that's not been disrupted. Personally, I've pushed children in pushchairs, buggies, joggers. I'd have no issue at all taking kids on that trail. I'd have no issue at all cycling on that trail. It's far safer even walking down that trail than walking down the hill on the grass where you're going to slip. Clearly, I use the park twice a day. Sometimes there's snow in the grass. It's much slippier with snow in it than it is walking on the trail. The trail is absolutely fabulous. So thank you very much for that. Now, a couple of comments that were made tonight about the plants in the park. The plants that are there now are invasive. When we moved to Tarrytown, that park was just grass. There wasn't even poison ivy wrapping around the trees there. It was immaculate. The devil's walking cane, the wineberries and the poison ivy are all stuff that's happened since the repeated purchases by developers when the park wasn't maintained. And unfortunately, some of my neighbours moved in and saw it in that state and quite rightly believe maybe that it's always been in that state, but it wasn't. It was much more maintained in the past. I know that there's been a school group that comes occasionally from Sleepy Hollow High School. They cycle through the park. It's far safer than cycling along the road. They're in a group led by a teacher that is out showing school children or Sleepy Hollow High School children, middle school children, the various paths through the village, which they should all be exploring as residents of the village. They're getting to see how they can connect and use different roads rather than actually being where traffic is. It's much safer for them. They're not cycling through there like has been commented, some sort of bicycle race. They're in a controlled, safe group with a teacher. Now, as for people cycling through the park, there's been, Trustee McGovern, I know you're going to ask me to cite the case for this, so I'll try and send it to you. But there has been studies done suggesting how useful cyclists are in terms of suppressing crime and vandalism, because cyclists come up on you quite quickly. And if you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, having a cyclist appearing out of nowhere is a good thing, right? It helps control crime and it helps make the whole space cleaner and safer. So I'll try and find that for you and send it to you. Okay. Right. So the park, I would say maybe 18 months ago, possibly longer, had a series of poles with flags, wooden poles with flags on them, showing the route the path was going to take. Since then, it's had, those were square wooden poles. It's had little thin wooden poles with flags on them, taking a slightly different route. Then it had a spray painted line through it. And then most recently, it had 3 massive pieces of bright yellow machinery parked on it for about a week before anything happened. So I would argue that some of the people that are making representation that they use the park clearly don't, otherwise they would have noticed some of these things. And I think that's all from me. Okay. Thank you.
I thought they were marking a Con Ed gas line.
Anybody else who hasn't gotten it?
Just want to quickly have a quick follow-up here. I don't know, I've sort of got the impression that there's a little us versus them going on here. The park users versus the big bad people that are living next to the park. And I want to be clear that I'm not against people using the park. I am against development happening without having a consideration for the neighbors. And 2, I just have a bit of a different vision than, maybe the Lakes Committee people or different people, in that I don't actually believe that people need a path to enjoy the park. My whole family has had a serious bout of Lyme disease. I am very well aware of ticks and have been, the tick scare thing. I get it, believe me. But I don't believe that you need a path to enjoy the park. I think it's just a difference of opinion. It's not that I want, people not to use the park. I want the whole town to enjoy the park. That's why it's there. I get that. I am just showing that I have a difference of what it should look like. And I personally think that it should be much more natural. I think that that benefits the people of Tarrytown much more, just simply because we don't have any space like that. So that's where I was coming from, not trying to make it my own private park. I never, ever thought that and would never think that. So I will leave it at that.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because I'm not that familiar with, I'm familiar with the park, but not familiar with the residents. Do you live in one of the new toll house?
I do, yes.
Okay.
I live in the park. I live in the house that's right near where the park connects to the trail.
Lake Trail.
Which is why we've always had people behind our house. It's not a new thing.
Right.
My issue is that now it's concentrated, and the buffer that allowed people to just walk right up to my, backyard, basically, has just been removed. I'm just asking for more plantings. I'm not asking for screening or anything. I'm just asking for a buffer. And just some consideration that, we're there. and as traffic increases, we hope that the board takes that into consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just want to say I agree with that.
I knew that.
I'm not sure, I'm just reiterating something before, but the element is about the being able to safely move through the park, And walking, if you're going down the hill and it's wet, you're just going to slide down. A path allows you to safely move through the park, walking, biking, stroller, whatever. But just in terms of, it's very hard to get through that park if we don't have a way to also move, the width. I'm hearing concerns about the width. We need to have a wide enough path so that two people can walk down a path at the same time. You can walk together. Similarly, I'm a little bit cavalier about the ticks. I think I probably should be a little more concerned, but many people don't use that park, I think, and don't go out now. People don't go out hiking because of ticks.
It is tick central there.
It's tick central, and people feel, and I'm one who always says to people, you're making a big deal out of nothing. But it's very concerning how fearful people are of being in nature at this point. And it's important that people are out getting around, walking around, biking around, enjoying parks. And we have so many beautiful natural areas in Tarrytown. I'd just also like to reiterate the importance of people knowing about them, a pamphlet, maps, and also the idea of us coming together to articulate what we want as a village, that this should be done. We should talk about what we want, as opposed to it feels like it's about people protecting their area from being invaded. And I don't want anybody to feel like we're not going to respect where they live, just like if anybody walks by my house down a public street, I hope that they're respectful of my home. I hope that we'll be respectful of somebody. If you live near a park, we're going to respect where you live.
That's it. The only thing I would add is that one of the things the path does, it allows you to walk or ride in almost any weather. Obviously, if there's a blizzard, it's no good, but when it's wet, it provides a dry path for people to walk. So it's not during the rain, after snow. It's one of the things that the path really does, which I've had many people actually say that, is that it's one of the real advantages of having a path through the park as opposed to just having it grass, is that you can use it when the weather is not ideal. And there's other justifications for it as well. But that's certainly one of the things that a path provides that you can't have if you just have a meadow there. It does restrict the times you can go there. Obviously, some people can go in muck boots, whatever, but it gets muddy and it gets wet. And this provides a dry path for people to travel on. Okay, I would guess that nobody else has other comments on other issues on the agenda. So we'll move on. I gotta find my place. Yeah. Appointment of a motor equipment operator. Be resolved, the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby appoint Raymond D. Fiore to the position of motor equipment operator, MEO, Step 4, in the Department of Public Works, at a starting annual salary of $75,280, effective February 4th, 2020, and shall be subject to a probationary period and to all applicable civil service rules and regulations.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor?
Aye.
An office assistant. Be resolved that the Police Department. Be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby appoint Brenda Canero to the position of Office Assistant, Automated Systems, Step 1, in the Police Department at an annual salary of $54,926 with an effective date of appointment retroactive to January 31, 2020, and a delayed start on February 10, 2020. This appointment is made from eligible list number 02-140 and is subject to a probationary period of 12 months and is subject to all civil service rules and regulations.
So moved.
All in favor? Appointment of a member of the Tarrytown Environmental Advisory Committee, TIAC. Be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby appoint Catherine Ruhlin as a member of the Tarrytown Environmental Advisory Committee, TIAC, to fill the unexpired term of Barbara Goodman Barnett to expire in December of 2020.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Appointment of a member of TIAC, another one. How come we didn't just do this as one? One resolution. Be resolved, the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby appoint, because you're filling on, I get it. Appoint James Carsey as a member of the Tarrytown Environmental Advisory Committee, TIAC, to fill the unexpired term of Joe Nevins to expire in December of 2020.
Second.
All in favor? Fire Department membership changes. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby approve the following Fire Department membership changes recommended at the January 2020 Board of Fire Wardens meeting. Members Heraclio Gaitan has been approved for active membership at Washington Engine. Kevin Lewis has resigned active membership from Hope Hose, and Matt Kova has been dropped from active membership from Riverside Hose. Driver Patrick Darvin Jr. has passed as a driver for Utility 61.
So moved, Mr. Mayor. Second.
All in favor? Building Department Engineering Intern, extension of work agreement. Be resolved, the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby authorize extension of the work agreement with Mariana Reese as Building Department Engineering Intern at an hourly rate of $25 per hour with hours not to exceed 17.5 per week through March 2nd, 2020.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Appointment of the Village of Tarrytown's 150th Anniversary Committee members. Whereas the Village of Tarrytown was incorporated on December 9th, 1870. And this year, 2020, the village will be celebrating its 150th anniversary. And whereas the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown wishes to establish a committee to plan and explore ideas to add special touches to our events to celebrate this momentous occasion, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby appoint the following as members of the Tarrytown 150th Anniversary Committee for a term to expire in December of 2021. Bert, wait, to expire 2 years?
No,
That's a typical 2-year appointment?
Oh, I mean, not that
We could say
anything
December
wrong with it,
2020.
but it just seems a little weird that we go
We could say
into.
December 2020.
No,
December.
we're kicking off our event right in December, so
Right.
we'll sort of
I
go.
thought we were
Oh,
going in there.
okay, all right, okay. I mean, it doesn't matter, but.
Bert wants to work on it.
Right, but it's going to, we have a whole nother year that they're appointed.
Can I ask a question before we go on this?
We're gonna keep the party going 2 years.
Bert wants to work on the other 150 coming up.
Are we,
Okay, good.
okay?
Whatever the board wants to do.
It does, it's okay, I mean, I thought it was a typo, but, okay. For a term to expire in December of 2021, Bert Hervich, Jack LaGrasse, actually, I don't really need to read the list. The names will be attached, you know who you are, and we're very thankful that you will be doing this. And you'll
And
be
we're gonna
contacted,
contact
no
them
doubt.
soon with their first date, right?
Right, there's about 20 people who have volunteered so far.
So moved.
And they will be. Wait, hold on, I didn't finish the resolution. Further resolved, the village administrator and assistant village administrator are appointed as ex officio non-voting members, and be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown will approve a second resolution to appoint the steering committee officers for the Tarrytown 150th Anniversary Committee.
And who would be the board representatives?
Did we decide?
We didn't, no.
Oh, me.
Karen?
Karen is not helping.
No, it's Karen.
Okay, Karen and Becky, okay.
All these people agree?
Yeah, they all
They all
volunteered,
said?
yeah.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
okay. It's moved.
So moved.
Doug Paul?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Declaration of surplus, Phoenix Hose Fire Truck. Be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown is hereby declare the 1997 E1 Phoenix Hose Fire Truck as surplus and ready for disposal by auction.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution of the Village of Tarrytown requesting amendments to New York State's criminal justice reforms. Whereas, while there was a need to reform New York's criminal justice statutes during the 2019 legislative session, it is widely recognized that several of the changes in the laws. Oh, yeah, it is very long.
Summarize it.
Yeah. Recently, as many people have read, there were changes that the state legislature approved and the governor signed that went into effect regarding the criminal justice system, bail, and the submission of documents having to be done within 15 days for discovery. And NICOM, which is the Conference of Mayors, New York State Conference of Mayors, has asked for a set of modifications to what was proposed. And the specifics, it doesn't call for its cancellation at all, but it's some minor items. So what I will read are the items that are resolved that they're asking for. Now therefore be resolved that the Village of Tarrytown supports the following set of amendments proposed by the New York State Conference of Mayors that are consistent with the intent of the criminal justice reform, but which will allow for more effective and affordable implementation. Ensure that cities and villages are provided with additional financial and operational support to offset the cost of these mandated measures. Allow 60 days for prosecutors to disclose evidence to the defense for criminal charges as opposed to the 15 days that was put into the law. Exclude from the accelerated discovery requirements any charge not involving a misdemeanor or felony. The reason for this is that the law as written is theoretically requires any action by a village or a town
Even
or a city,
including
to
moving
have
violations.
to follow the discovery requirements, which is an incredible burden on any municipality. Adjust the 20-day arraignment requirement to accommodate local courts that meet on a monthly basis. This is probably mostly for an upstate villages, I would assume, that are very small. And allow prosecutors to withhold sensitive information such as victim contact information without having to obtain a court order. Be it further resolved that this duly adopted resolution of the Village of Tarrytown be forwarded to Governor Andrew Cuomo, Senate Majority Leader Andre Stewart Cousins, Assembly Speaker Carl Hasty, and Assemblyman Tom Abenanti, and the New York State Conference of Mayors.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have amendment to the master fee schedule, which I will not read since it is incredibly long and complicated, and the details will be attached to the agenda. There are increases.
Just say the general area.
Softball, parks, fitness center, pool membership, parking permits. Okay, parking permits, I'll read. Residents will be $450 a year, $355 semi-annual. Non-residents, $1,340 a year, $875 semi-annual. Non-resident business, $320 a year, $260 semi-annual. Resident carpool, $450 a year plus $90 each additional car. $330 semi-annual plus $65 each additional car. Non-residential carpool, $1,340 plus $155 each additional car, $875 for semi-annual plus $130 each additional car. There's a long list. If anybody is paying fees, they should check the minutes to see what they will be. It's too long and complicated, and won't make any sense for me just to
And we
say
also
them.
have the summer day camp.
Summer day camp, yeah, it's, the fees, there are changes in the fees, not all fees will change, but many,
Correct.
most.
So we're doing these because the
Right.
Parks
These
and
have time,
Recreation
right,
brochure has to
right.
go
It's
out.
mostly parks, that will come up.
Yep.
So be resolved, the Board of Trustees, no, wait, I jumped to the next one.
Just about 17.
No, I went too far. Be further resolved that these fees shall be updated and published by the appropriate departments and village staff as part of the village master fee schedule. All in favor? Update to authorize Labor Council with Bond, Shonik, and King PLCC. Be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby authorize and direct the village administrator to execute an updated agreement with the Village Labor Council, Bond, Shonik, and King PLCC. All in favor? And schedule a public hearing for local landmark designation. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby schedule a public hearing for the regular meeting of Tuesday, February 18th, 2020 at 8 p.m. in the Municipal Building, 1 Depot Plaza, Tarrytown, New York, to hear and consider a proposed amendment to the Code of the Village of Tarrytown, Chapter 191, entitled Historic Landmark Designations, for the purpose of designating certain elements of the brick warehouse building at 17 North Washington Street as a local landmark designation, and directs the village administrator and our village clerk to take the necessary and appropriate actions to circulate the code-required notices with regard to this proposed designation. Second? All in favor? And the minutes. Be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees held on January 21, 2020, as submitted by the village clerk. All in favor? And the vouchers. Be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tarrytown does hereby approve abstract number 14 of audited vouchers in the total amount of $118,286.36 as presented by the village treasurer. Second?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I vote yes, but I must abstain from voucher number 201-801-2308. It's from my son Justin, Whitford Fire Department. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Now, we ready to you have something you want to?
Rachel, did you want to make an announcement? I did the vote thing. What was the other thing you wanted?
Oh, I wanted to announce.
Come up.
Yeah.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Rachel Teeger with TIAC, and I live at 1 Linden Place. I wanted to announce our monthly film series. Did you announce that already? I'm sorry, I was late. Okay. So it's coming up tomorrow is our next one. Did you announce what it was?
Yep.
Cowsphere. Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much.
That's it? Okay. We make a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Make that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we will not come back to the microphones or video.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Fred, good night.